in a bit of a different location today, but hopefully I have set up the sound and the picture so that you can hear me well. So can everybody hear my voice loudly and clearly? Okay, great. And Geshe Atiśa.
Yeah, congratulations.
And can you hear Geshe as well? Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to quickly adjust our sound settings to musicians, and then we'll get started. So Dave, I'm not seeing the sound from musicians thing, so I
think it's
right? Oh, I see it now. Sorry.
Yeah.
We've been through this before. You called me before.
Might need to do a sound check again.
Okay, yeah, no, we will after, because I'm further from the mic, right? So you won't be hearing me as well.
It also changes the setting it to that changes the way Zoom works. So
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
so you may have to change the little.
What do you think? Is it worth doing, or should I just leave it?
Are we doing a transmission?
No, nothing. Just our regular thing. Some short prayers.
It's worth doing it because then we can hear you doing the mandala offering.
Okay. All right. So it's turned on now. Check.
That's good. That seems all right.
Geshe Sonam.
Hello.
Yeah, good.
Oh, yeah.
What did happen is that the camera got a little funny now. So.
Okay. Good.
Is that good?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks for your patience, everybody. We'll get started now. Olosogi.
Oh, yeah,
So first of all, Tashi Dele Geshe hopes that you're all well, that you're all happy, and that everything in life is good and improving. So as all of us are gathered together here
Hey,
today,
Can you move
Yes.
your microphone closer, please? Geshe is good, but you're a bit quiet.
Am I a bit quiet? All right. How's that? Is that better?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so as all of us are gathered together today, wherever you are, think that the place where I am, this is the abode for the activities of accumulation and purification that I will be engaging in today. And also think that the qualities, the potential of our mind, this is the abode or the basis from which we can bring forth the positive mental states that we are seeking to develop. And also, whether we are a person who believes in past or future lifetimes or not, those kind of principles, we can approach these kind of teachings as an opportunity to observe our mind a little bit like a game. And in this way, we can have sort of a playful, fun approach to applying the teachings. And also to understand that we all share the same basic wishes, right? The wish from the bottom of our heart, from the depths of our mind, to be able to achieve a stable happiness, and also to be able to reduce any kind of suffering. And generally in the Buddhist teachings, we speak about 8 things to abandon. And these 8 things to abandon are known as the 8 worldly dharmas, or the 8 worldly attitudes. But one of the interesting things is that as we come to a higher level of study and a practice, rather than being a hindrance, these 8 worldly dharmas can actually start to function as some condition of assisting us.
오다 강가시 메트린 일 빼자와 이나스.
So Geshe is not going to go through all 8, but just to give a taste of this principle, we're going to look at 2.
빼나 대화도 등한일 빼자와 이나. 다 노징아도 지대 치제는 니가가 대화 오프게 쉬나. 오프게 과자치들이 하러 왔어.
So one of the things that's mentioned in the 8 worldly dharmas is the wishing to avoid suffering, being attached to that, and being attached to happiness. So generally this kind of a grasping at temporary or worldly happiness, in the context of the 8 worldly dharmas, this is a gokja, something to be ceased or abandoned.
때 가르세게 요래서는 소노토도 마시나 오다 프게 니가를 기워스 주스나 디가 할레베더니 너무 강가 슈처럼 돈이라 아니 가르이나요 내가 뭐 지운 거 하레스.
So why would this be the case? It's because when we experience those kind of temporary happinesses, what happens is we can sort of become over the moon about that, and that sort of unrealistic over the moon reaction to that happiness acts actually as a basis for different kinds of afflictions to arise.
다 디기 찬일라 다 프게 과자를 프게 과자를 소노치도 하레스.
And so that kind of attitude, right, towards that temporary happiness, this is something that we can see as that we want to cease or that we want to reduce.
다 니가 대시 쉬나요. 다는 요래 그 졸은도야. 소소 프게 제야 보지는도야. 소노 가르스도 가르세나스.
But what if that temporary happiness is something that is allowing us the conditions to be able to practice happily, to be able to cultivate joyfully, right? How do we think about worldly happiness in that context?
다 니가 그 프게 대시 간르스 쉬와 이나요. 다 때리 여보 쉬소. 어셔왕가 메테나만 첸디이나 개와 드비가 지가 여보 치레스.
One of the ways we can think about it is, you know what, today was a good day. I was pretty happy today. And I understand that that happiness that I'm experiencing now is the fruit, is the result of the virtuous karma that I have accumulated in the past. That's one way to approach it.
다 단다이나요. 개와 못하네 때뭐 생제에 텔레주 생제에 지시에서는 다 개와 조심 매바데 그또 이워지요 하레스.
And if I use that as a basis to collect further virtue, to cultivate more positive mental qualities, then the basis of that happiness, which is temporary, can be transformed into a basis for something that is inexhaustible. So that's one way we can think.
다 때내서 지레스. 다 내서 여가지로 단다 대화야 보슈 스티키 원디와스. 다 때rumje 서도 설이나인데 와야 반노지 때내서 쉬나 sombe 전바도 이제고 졸노소나 할래 제야 보질로야 하레스.
Another way to think about it is, you know what? Today was a pretty good day. I was happy today. How wonderful if not only myself, but also other beings could experience this kind of happiness and the causes of that happiness. And then that experience of worldly happiness can actually be a basis for developing love and compassion in relation to others. So that's another way to transform it.
다 던지지는 오소노도 개바지를 보겐도사친도와 대마도 다 뭐뭐지 다 두르두르는 대시스 주소나 디가 다 녀모슈처럼도 나자슈처럼도 건조질 쓰지도 못한 바 강갈 강에 제게 좋아노요레스.
So that is a way to kind of approach the experiences of worldly happiness skillfully, yeah, mindfully. But if we don't do that when we experience those instances of worldly happiness, if we become excessively attached to that worldly happiness, this can actually compel us to negativity and attempts to preserve it. And in fact, our situation will get worse and worse, will increasingly become disharmonious with others, and so forth.
다 녀모고 졸은도야 제도 드네 게이고 졸은도야 보게 다 관인도 근도와스.
So there's 2 ways and 2 outcomes in terms of how we approach that temporary happiness, and accordingly, that temporary happiness can become an assist to the afflictions, or it can become an assist in our developing the positive, in developing virtue.
다 지바레스. 강에 쉬나 다 보게 마가와 쉬 전부 동지소요 알아왔어. 다 대우 저거 말해서 지세요 할 때는 다 강에 쉬나 요 손으로 또 요가 쉬나 랭에민 지브레 존도 그래 할래야만도 될라 때네 어느 소속을 랭에민 지브 존도 그래 얘를 돈 내가 녀라서 봐 가르치나 요 좋아야 아니 어떤 데서 뭐 모여 알았어.
The other one is seeking to avoid being attached to avoiding difficulties or suffering. That's another of these 8 worldly dharmas. So, but actually, how can we experience that difficulty or that suffering in a way that is an assistive practice? Well, we can think that the result that I am experiencing now, right, this is coming from negative karma that I have accumulated in the past. And by experiencing this result now, that karma is being purified and I will not have to experience it again. Then going a step further, not only am I experiencing this resultant suffering, but also sentient beings are experiencing that, and then using that suffering as a practice of tonglen, of taking and giving. This is a way to transform that.
소소를 자야 동 아니 예를 보게 다 자침보요는 가르는 요래서야 다다 두 침보지는 거근데 왔어.
So whether from the perspective of oneself, whether the perspective from the perspective of others, if one knows how to think as one experiences happiness, suffering, and so forth, actually they can become a very great assist to our practice or our cultivation. And so there's many ways also that we can transform these unfortunate conditions into a path of practice, transforming difficulties into the path. If we don't have this way of thinking, if we don't know how to think about that suffering, then when we experience difficult circumstances, we can become extremely discouraged in our practice and so forth, and we can waste the opportunity that this precious human life provides. So if we have this knowledge and then we think, whether happiness arises, whether suffering arises, I kind of know what to do, and this is the way I'm going to think about it, to approach it in our mind, then this is definitely going to help us be more peaceful, more relaxed as we go forward. So these instructions, Geshe said, this perspective of the 8 worldly dharmas, how there can be contexts or ways to think about them in which they're not something to be abandoned. This is not something that you find in many, many scriptures, but this is something that you find in the instructions of a few holy beings that are quite realized, so he thought he would share it with you. So the other thing too, right, is that from seeing how this can be transformed, an awareness can come that actually it's not the outer conditions that need to be the main thing that determine how we progress, but actually it can be the inner conditions that determine that. So just as some advice at the beginning, so try to think about that and reflect on that as much as you can and use it. Yeah? So we really see there's kind of 2 paths to approaching this problem of the 8 worldly dharmas. The first is to see the 8 worldly dharmas as something that we want to get rid of, something that we want to cease or abandon. And the second is that when they arise, to transform our way of thinking about it, and in that way to be able to use in our practice. And in order to be able to practice that well, of course, we need a mind and a body that are relaxed and stable. So we'll take a moment to place the body and mind in a state of peace.
tanda jaten no jigpa ken chome bi choa no to kanga pandri rimbe yan ro yo sampachi.
So hopefully you could hear that sound, but anyway, if you didn't, imagine the sound of a gong, and just as that gong slowly, slowly, slowly fades out, imagine that the coarser thoughts and feelings that you were experiencing slowly, slowly begin to dissolve away.
Li dewa to se tunyo go mun ta lele cho so sampachi.
And from the body and the mind being placed into this state of equanimity, you become very relaxed.
Ta sel mi pa me ba chin chom de ta mi pa yo ba ye tone ta lele chin ro yi sampachi.
And also thinking that, we're not going to just kind of relax the mind without focusing on an object. What we're going to do is take an object of meditation or focus, but proceed in this relaxed state.
Li temba nya jo choa temba nya jo ni ta pa nyang do li la bo chi khton ro yi.
So the plan is to do a brief meditation where we approach a simple practice of the close placement of mindfulness on the body and a simple practice of the close placement of mindfulness on the mind.
Rimba tombo mi pa te li ge te ge chal ne se kar yo ma te ni se ya chi.
So the first step for the close placement of mindfulness on the body is to observe the body and the feelings and so forth that may be arising.
Kar yi na koro ngo shi pa shi ne zo de ya chi ma to ne si yan da shul kar yi na to no mai ba.
So whatever feeling, sensation, and so forth arises, just recognize or note it. And just focus on that process of recognizing, not getting distracted.
Li ka wa ta yi na yo ta li ge te chi bo ro wa sta da te la choa ma ro kar yo wan ro.
Wherever we look in our body, whatever part of our body we focus on, we see that it's just the basis for the arising of these feelings or sensations. But those feelings or sensations are not pinpointable.
She yi li to nong ge li la ta wa na ta choa ma ro kar de.
So when we focus on the outer or the surface of our body, what's the experience of that and the feelings arising from that? And then when we draw our attention inwards to the inner components of the body, what's our experience of that?
Tene rimba ni pa li che pa we chal shi yi li pa nong ge li ne se kar li pa ba.
And so start with that, with the sort of upper quadrant of your body. And then as you move to the middle quadrant of your body, think, what are the experiences of the outer sensations, the outer part of my body, and the experience of the inner sensations of the middle part of my body?
Shido nong ge li la ta wa na choa ma ro kar yo gon de.
When we look at that, what's the difference between the outer sensations on sort of the surface of the body and the inner sensations when we go inside?
Li ma de cha tan de on tan de la ta we ka la choa ka nge ge cha shu che ran ro gon de ma de.
And if we notice an uncomfortable feeling or a feeling of pain. When we recognize that and place our attention on that, does the feeling of discomfort get worse or does it diminish?
리치 강에 그 초아드는 요바이는 대용 지엠모 지라 때니 코시마 지렌데 마튼 저거 주사지로 하면 돼 서마로.
We go into that discomfort and we think about where it is within our body. We'll see that it's a temporary feeling that is arising from causes and conditions. It's not something findable or stable.
강에 그 차슈 좌보데 소소 세그 몸보지서 아마도 소마 노유 때 노이지 때보면 돼 소마지.
So for those of us who experience pain, it's really helpful to think that that pain might not be present, might not be existing in the way that it seems to. Actually, a lot of our experience of pain is determined by our mental attitude towards it, and our mind can actually exaggerate or diminish the pain.
테네르 바스바 리치 메치 차공 연바텔 타와나 소와데디 토노 카르카르므라 용고데.
So having done that for the middle portion of our body, think about the lower part of our body and just observe the feelings that are arising there, whether pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral.
리세 샤와트디 제네다 예라보치네 데바이나 초메비 초와 노도 강가 야치고 그 냐추지 노지 아니 어디 건네바메바시니라 크로스 어다트니 제네 데데근데 소마로.
As we direct our mindfulness to the body or mindfulness to the mind, we can think that our attention and these various feelings and so forth that are arising, these are like a fish beneath the surface of a lake or pond. They can dart about, but they don't disturb the surface of the water.
쳔바니자 라바텔라 테네 다 리세 샤와도 다 레레 야보초아소 소마로.
I think from practicing this close placement of mindfulness on the coarser experience of the body and the mind, both the body and the mind are more peaceful.
리세 가와타와 이나연도나 제mom보 지라테네 코스모데 아마톤 템보치 kon rumeni tabanzu 추다만도 소마지.
I think the body and mind, that these arise from the coming together of various conditions. There's no aspect of them that exists in and of itself. If we were to try to find something permanent, something findable, we would not be able to do so.
tenri ruji chaba meba yinayo tetne mebi tinela ane seya pote shomba to niji to shonjuji sela soba ota karo deba yina diji yo patata kawazumbo yi sombaji.
And think, actually, the lack of inherent existence of these things means that whatever positive mental quality we need to bring forth, love, compassion, or bodhicitta, for example, we are definitely able to develop and realize these.
tenri somba noji chi yongwa chi sowa tsechi tetaga yo sombaji.
And may I be able to develop those qualities exactly as I think or wish will make single-pointed requests for blessings to be able to do that. Yeah, we're not sure if you hear that. I'm curious. Did you hear that sound or not? You did? Okay, that's good. Nice. So let's do the prayers for the beginning of the teaching. Geshe said we're going to go at a good pace so that we can cover more in the class.
Lana meba la do mi no ji demba sunji jonden de beja shaja do la jozo lo judo jazo jo jonden de je sheba da jomba yonda ba zuwe zonje riba don jazo demba dewa sheba ji de jemba jebo de kalo jo Lana meba la do mi no ji demba sonji jonden de beja shaja do la shaza lo judo jazo jo jonden de je jeba da jomba yonda wa zuwe zonji riba don jazo demba dewa sheba ji de jemba jebo de kalo jo Lana meba la do mi no ji demba sonji jonden shaja do wa la jazo che do jazo jo.
Mandala offering. Yeah, also quickly. Saji
Bijo juji me do jo ra li jo nyo de je wang do song je jin me de mo wa ye ro go non da shi la je wa jo ye do gu ra ra na me da gu na ya da song je ji do zu jo jo na la zhong zhe ba de da ne jia zi ji da ge ji jie ji bi su na jian zhe la bin song ji de wa zhu song je ji do zu jo jo na zhong zhe ba de da ne jia zi ji da ge ji bi su na jian zhe la bin wa zhu song je ji do zu jo jo na zhong zhe ba de da ne jia zi ji da ge ji bi su na jian zhe la bin song je de wa zhu. Oya, ta nga roso leka kong xie pa te ta pake ane yo ngen ju se se to no ji tsung ji tenpo shu na ta keso chimbo ra ya se ya res.
So all of our kind of spiritual activities, if they are complete in the beginning, in the middle, and the end, then we'll be able to have the result or the outcome that we seek.
Tene yo te zi ja cher tu ge yin da wa te te ji no no yo som ba yo wa ta tu se re ganga tsung shu na gewa yin gewa to chimbo. Mo gewa yin mo gewa to chimbo.
Sorry, ji,
Somba, Yowa,
Jorwa,
Tatu.
Yeah. So in the Vinaya, in the monastic text, it kind of fleshes this out a little bit more, and it says if the basis, the motivation, the preparation, and the conclusion are complete, then one can have a powerful karma, powerful cause established.
Ota gewa de magewa kari na te jetet matsona o le chasuchi nani zo thoya mares.
So whether we look from the point of view of wholesome karma or from the point of view of unwholesome karma, if these four, the basis, motivation, preparation, and conclusion, are not sort of all in place, then that karma, whether wholesome or unwholesome, will be incomplete.
어다 쇼차와도 개와ച്ച 가와자와 이나에 대시대 자요. 먹개와절 가와 이나에 자요. 지바레.
So we can apply these kind of four steps to our virtuous practices, even as we offer prostrations and prayers and so forth, and also to things like our activities that may be related to the 10 non-virtues, right? If these four are in place, it is complete. If not, it is not a complete karma.
어다 간갈을 때나 어다 기한 자원다고 요. 그놈부터 다 같이 뭐 저기 요래. 가와이나.
And it is for that reason, actually, that for all of us, kind of wherever we are on the path, that the motivation is something that is very important for us to pay attention to.
어다 간주 따쳐서 이나요. 슈케네세 저게 세야 보지 소노 돈이 다 때에서 제토바이나. 딘님마텔라. 가제 터더 그 뱀뱀마지는 거 요래.
So, if we develop this simple practice of, as soon as we get up in the morning, trying to bring a positive motivation, wish, within our mind, then what that can do is transform the entire day into a possible basis for accumulating virtue, for accumulating the positive.
슈케네 다세 초메비 세세나 만데 다 마가에 세 버게 슈쇼 보치 세는 아니라 안데 대제바이나 띠님한테 서도 되나서 가와이나 따따 사자 마시는 오 강해요 아레스.
So on the other hand, if we wake up in sort of a mood, if we're unhappy, if we're narrow-minded, then, whoever we meet, they'll have to be careful, won't they? It can be easy to fall into difficulties.
어떤 가만노라 좀전에 다 두고 봐서 가지나 튀어러 왔어. 튀어가 맞는 언제도 다 가리나 되어지려면 다 때려 좋은다고 뒤사서 다 기시면 메스 반도 그랬어. 저 투산디 왔어. 좀전에.
Right. So in the monastery, of course, they're living in community, and so the Geshe experience is that the monks often tease each other when they notice that someone's in a bad mood, when they notice that someone has an unpleasant expression, and then they'll say, oh, you better be careful, he's not himself. It looks like he may be a little bit drunk, so stay away, right? So they kind of, it's like they like to poke, right, when they see someone in a mood like that.
다 된다디 그 세지 선바야 보이지 선방년바지나 딘니바티 코가로지 내긴도 와서 마시나.
So the point is that if we're not careful, those sort of first moments when we wake up, whether it's like good positive minds or bad minds, if we're not careful, right, if we don't take steps to be aware, it can actually flavor the whole day as it goes forward.
어다 그놈도 모아서 다스야 보시나 할레비 같이 뭐 할레비 더니 다 그냥 사실 뭐랬어.
And it is also for this reason that with our practices, then the motivation and the dedication, right, when done properly, they can be very, very precious. They're very important.
저도 갈래지치는 간주 두는 용 그랬더니 하리 뽀가 손지 예수가라. 저도야 보냐니 키딜 뇨레신 뚜빠지를 시토마 시마서 왔어.
So it is said that actually Shariputra, during the time of one of the previous Buddhas, Kashyapa, actually he had practiced a very high level of ethics, but yet he was not able to bring forth realization.
다 이내가 또 다리 될로 뚜빠시에 마서 되는 마고빠는 손지 쪼된데 가능아. 또 뚜빠시와 쇼서 이렇게 겨와도 또 뭐지 뭐서 왔어.
But as he was practicing, right, that virtue of ethical conduct, he dedicated it that even though I may not be able to reach realization in this lifetime, may I be able to reach realization in the future lifetime during the turning of the wheel of Shakyamuni Buddha.
다 손지 쪼된데 가를 또 뭐셔로 빠레테네 지마 듣고 노발 지제지 태그딜라 슐로가 지가 더가로 그랬더니 또 많이에서 또 다 야세 뭐로 왔어.
And it is said that actually in that lifetime, Shariputra began practicing sort of a non-Buddhist system, but when he met Shakyamuni Buddha, because of his previous dedication and his previous merits, just from hearing one verse of Dharma, he was able to have a direct realization of emptiness, and that is something that is really incredible.
어다 진로 강간노로 다 대지야 유사샤까지 니마 gel로 강간노 텔 다까 델 레초체스 레칼 하마테즈 마토라야 말이스.
So whether we approach this, you find this in the teaching of all the Tibetan Buddhist lineages, Sakya, Kagyu, Nyingma, Geluk, that that kind of realization happens very quickly, and it's like there's just a short remainder of practice left to be complete. So just that seemingly small thing of hearing that verse acts as a ripening condition.
다 간존되는 비타 맞아 자가 요는 계산으로 맞아 토아를 못 주는 거이나. 대 노드가 됐도는 야대반다 오지래 되어res.
Ale.
아저자 못하는 거이나 다 디세를 원로 가라was.
Jagala padron.
자가 가인다 야래.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like if you think about these exceptional beings who just have that small remainder that they need to cultivate, think that you want to go to a faraway place. So I guess that depends on where you are in the world, but for us that would be India. If you are one of the people that just have this small remainder left to cultivate, it's like you've already purchased that flight ticket, that airplane ticket. And really all that's left to do is actually get on the plane to arrive at your destination. If you don't have that, if you're in more of an ordinary situation like many of us, think about like you're going to have to like drive to the coast and then take a boat there. It's a little bit like that.
어다시부터 무슨라면도 개파서 빼자기 하는 라원다워르다스. 안주 단단전은 노이와르테 디세르고 콤바자기는 무탄로기는 타르 못 가라was. 코트가티 돈에 니파카가 냐디와 로그딜 리라워치는 말레크는 젠다 말레크는 콜렌도 그라was.
So the holy beings explain this, that for most of us it's going to be a complicated process. We need to first figure out the destination, and then we need to walk. We need to take a vehicle, or we need to take a boat to be able to arrive there, right? So we have quite a long period of practice in front of us, realistically. But for people with just that small remainder, like Shariputra, it's as if they've already purchased the airplane ticket, right? And all they have to do is kind of get on the plane. They'll arrive at the destination quickly.
어다소소서 개와드이 토로 만도와 손지 마토 받은 리벨 대화를 달롱시 주야 계속 치모라was 야보시나.
And if we understand this and we dedicate accordingly, then actually some essence of any virtue that we dedicate, some of its potential is going to remain all the way up until Buddhahood. And so then in this way we will take a few moments to develop a positive motivation. So what we'll do is take a few breaths with mindfulness. So breathing in deeply, holding it for a moment, and exhaling deeply a few times. I think in this way the chakras, the energy channels have opened, the prana, the winds are free, and in this way the body and the mind are in a good equilibrium, better than before. So if you can see the image of white Tara behind Geshe in your screen, or if you know what white Tara looks like, just imagine her in the space in front of you. Imagine as we gaze upon her holy form, that also wanting to receive the benefits of her enlightened activity. All sentient beings in human form are gathered around us. And with a very, very pure mind, faith, this motivation, think, I wish to be able to actualize enlightenment, to be able to completely remove the suffering of all sentient beings and bring them to happiness. Therefore, I go for refuge to you, White Tara, and seek your blessing.
Jipa yuzu le chowa, deshi yuzu pagete toyakta koronipat chel yor chel chas demoto yi sumoto.
I go for refuge in a very stable way, understanding that Tara definitely has the capacity to assist me in being free of all fears and suffering, and definitely has the capacity to help me to develop all happiness.
Senji yuzu ta page deshi ke tendala. Ane maro sui na yu nga sa te jise drama joro ta nuji cha to bachi so yi sumoji.
Think for the sake of all sentient beings, bringing them to benefit. May that I call the self, that I must actualize it to achieve the same enlightenment as you, Venerable Tara. Bring forth a powerful bodhicitta.
Yisi drome tukane geze shu chil sine pa detse geze zombali te dona koye ne yuzu lo pa senji yuzu ge sho lo pa chabamba ba no shi dese pa so.
And think that from Venerable Tara's heart, light rays and nectars emanate to the 10 directions, reaching all environments and all sentient beings, clearing away their difficulties, purifying them, establishing them in happiness. All the realms become pure.
Ri chu yuzu li dewa to se kiwa to shwa lele kiwa ya pa so samanda.
Think all 6 types of beings within samsara, their difficulties of body and mind have been cleared away, and their body and mind are healthy, happy, blissful. Sorry, louder than I intended. My apologies.
Oh, yeah, that's what I did.
Gosh, that was surprising. He thought it was lackluster before. I guess it was loud enough last time.
Oh, that's what I'm doing. I was going to do my combo talk with the Shirezi combo talk with the Jamaica combo talk with this.
So all of us, what we want to be able to do is to fulfill our motivation, our wish to actualize the state of Tara, or actualize the state of Mañjuśrī, or actualize the state of Avalokiteshvara.
Oh, that ten do ya get that Jalanda what is Janda what that so thing are so tend you are say.
And the basis for being able to actualize that, the basis for being able to get there, actually, there's different things, but we could say that the main thing is something internal, something within us.
Oh, that do to us, that ten do ya so the takan the halevin le shed devo, that the wong in a law circle the size that they were hilarious.
And then to be able to get there, a method that is easy to practice, that is comprehensive in covering the practices of the 3 scopes, is this text by Atiśa, Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment.
Oh, she would chung to Tamoy Longeramba. She would read to Tamoy Longeramba. She would chamber Tamoa Jagama. She would chamber Longeramba.
And so as we think about this, right away we want to think about the stages of the path common to beings of a lesser capacity, the stages of the path common to beings of a middling capacity, and the third one is the stages of the path of beings of a great capacity. Notice in the third, we don't have this word common attached.
다 시부 첨벌로 요 손제 샘발로 요 손제살로 요 로케시나 시분 중앙으로 거야 뭐뭐 요아래 시분 디기로 요다 몬치아 그거 요아래 데이터 도모이로.
So one who has this great scope motivation of cultivating the bodhisattva path and reaching Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings, they also need to incorporate many of the practices of the small scope of those of lesser capacity and the middle scope of those of middling capacity. That's why we see common used in the context of the first two scopes, small and middle.
구와 도다서 누지치 손으로 돈은 다 되고 요아레스.
If you think about it as like a 3-story house, that's an easy way to conceptualize it, right? The top one needs the common elements of the middle and bottom stories.
다 도자 선바텔은 도알 바바텔은 만도안도 삼만디 바바텔은 도알 돈벌 만도안도 삼만디 તને કોતા 좀 미르메도 가라스.
And also it becomes clear that if you want to reach the top of that house, right, the only way to do that is to start from the ground floor, walk up to the second story, and then from the second story, then walk up to the top floor, right? You can't just immediately kind of get yourself to the top floor without doing that.
다 든지지랜드. 다 됐을래요는 다 든미진자 다 되버린 서마도 되와스.
Yeah, so then if you are able to keep this in your mind, and you should be able to, it's very beneficial, because really there's only 3 kind of outlines here, right?
다 간저시다 뭐 이워든로야 말했던 시워 챔비가
And so then we haven't covered it extensively, but in terms of where we are in the text now, we're actually discussing the practices related to the great scope, the stages of the path of beings of a great capacity.
다 가슴간주 따다 고샤 따다스도 제마수테네. 디따디라. 수지근 도이노라. 아니 쇼지 세시나 펜들이 요아르세네. 세노들이 사그레세네. 치지 슐로가 서거토네 제자기 스텐도 차와레스.
And so then in terms of where we are in the text, Geshe's not sure how extensively we covered it, but was talking about how to what the benefits are according to kind of 3 verses, what the benefits are of bodhicitta generating it, and so forth.
너 슐로가 돈버티게 된다 가르레서나.
Sorry.
니에도
So the first of those verses that we already covered last time.
나로서 존지지 세지 시와이나. 존지 셈베 돈발어서 봤더니 제와이나. 주인다고 찾아봐이는 더 멀리 또 선될 잡아이나요. 마셔바지 세노사그레 슐로가 돈버티게 되시.
Toksum Zambuling Toksum, the upper
또 첨보. 더 멀리 다 할래. 쇼모 버세기 알아봐. 말 되는 야말 다 배도 야말했어. 다때는 더 멀리 될 생긴다 그랬어. 주인다고 찾아봐이는 더 멀리 될 잡아이나요. 마셔바지가 다 세노치사도 그래.
And one of the things that was mentioned that is if we were to try to kind of account the benefits of a bodhicitta somehow as like pebbles or motes of dust, that the entire surface of the earth would not be enough to accommodate all of those pebbles or those benefits.
슐로지 찌익 된다 대시 말해. 슐로가 니바티가 샤마가 보게 더 중가 잡아이나. 겨와데.
Yeah.
중가자마 도바지 겨와서.
The next one is if we were to count the merits of that as grains of sand, that they would be uncountable. There would not be enough grains of sand to be able to count those merits.
다때 라마 예배 원드시는 라마요 보게 따다 그 초가를 해봤더니 지산에 달래 그래. 슐로가 선바티가.
And then also it explains that if we're able to receive the bodhisattva vows in the context of a lama, a preceptor who is skilled in the ritual, it is good to receive it from him or from her.
다 대진도 차와래 돼. 다 가서 티서 저기 있으면 도기 저런 누가 티서 돼.
And so then that's what is meant by the meaning of these 3 verses.
티서 때가 말아.
Lagami.
다 라마 매배 원드시는 데들이 대운도 차와래스.
Yeah. And Dromaso.
로차레
Dela ngunse jampepe.
세미스 대주도 못해서 뒤따디라. 라마 매바이나요. 소소소 근들 시타니라. 저기 재미도 말래 주고 데들이 해서.
And then also there is a discussion here about how if we're not taking the bodhisattva vows from If we're not taking the vows from a preceptor, we can do this visualizing the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas.
소도 바시게 되면 심나지. 오, 다 들이 저 녀시 장아들 만로이스 카드.
And so today we're going to go it's like, okay, so we're going to be starting on page 7. If you have the English text, we'll be starting on page 7 from verse 25, which is the top verse.
대라 녀체 좀비빨 아와 란자 제바이 지타르 쇼주 투시에반 좀바진 손지시 젠전도 리시에바타 대전던 라사지.
So, verse number 25. With utmost clarity I shall write how long ago when he was Ambaraja, Mañjuśrī generated bodhicitta as described in the ornament of Mañjuśrī's Buddha Field Sutra.
다 쇼주세만 조방만 아바란자이나세 코로시비까라.
Arapatsa ale.
다 들지까 드네 기억다. 쇼쇼 단다다는 게 지요와.
So this is about gonda the jampe yang jangchu sembe shube kapla.
Shonju sembe
arapatsa.
세시비까라.
Ale. Okay. So this is interesting. So as we look at verse number 25, Geshe is saying that this explains how Mañjuśrī, before his enlightenment, right, when he was still a bodhisattva practitioner, he received these vows at a time when he was known as Om Arapatsa. So Geshe is giving Ambaraja as Om Arapatsa, which is interesting.
엄마 아빠도 먼저 가르쳐.
Ale.
아바란자.
Okay, sorry, it is apara. The Sanskrit and the Tibetan always sounds a bit different. Yeah, so it's aparatsa. So I guess, sorry, it is ambaraja. Okay.
되게 좋아서 어다 디네스도 마치 저기 쇼주도 뭐 도말레도 마트기스.
And so then according kind of to that tradition, we'll explain how in the absence of a preceptor, how to generate and receive the bodhisattva vows.
다 녀시 자루바.
So from verse 26 going forward.
녀본노 제시행아르 서리아보 제시다.
So in the presence of the protectors, that means we should visualize the holy beings well. So visualize the objects of refuge as extensively as you can, all of the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and the other holy beings. I shall generate the mind of enlightenment. So that's a promise that I will definitely achieve enlightenment so that I'm capable of benefiting all sentient beings. And actually at this point we can think that what we're generating up to this point is the wishing or aspiring bodhicitta. And I invite all beings as my guests. These I shall liberate from samsara. At this point, you can think you're doing engaging bodhicitta and receiving the bodhisattva precepts. The beauty of this verse is it's just very, very short. It's very few words, but all of the meaning of aspiring and engaging bodhicitta is here, actually.
로와 토제 렌드니 로와 요스 주바 자 첨부 전에 소소가 다 보게 니 야쇼 자 체쇼데 저기 자들 요가지 요마로스.
So when it says I invite all beings as my guests, that means that you're thinking of all migrators, all beings within samsara, as being very close to you, as being connected to you. And there are few thoughts more powerful than that.
된다 되네 저 가르쳐요. 현재 요주 자 첨부 이자 니자 체쇼데 이자 아니 강가 여보 이자 강에 매봐줘야 다리 랭킹 알요.
And so as we think that, right, invite all beings as my guests. Why are we inviting them all as our guests? Because all of these sentient beings are precious. They are all close to us. And because they are precious and close to us, I myself alone must get rid of their suffering and so forth. And so Actually, we talk about making offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the offering of material things and the offering of practice. The offering of practice is the supreme of these two. And the offering of this practice, this taking the responsibility to remove the suffering of all sentient beings, it's seen as one of the supreme offerings of practice by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
다 소노도 되려라. 손지도 전제 선바서는 senjel 소노도 해야지 마도 된다 야 말이야. 다 나로서 senje 쪼지리 보게 계제 여보셔 봐 이늘에 나 대해서 여보셔 더 봐. 이는 손지도 다 디서 손지 요도 되년도 야.
So think about why this would be the case. Why would the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas be most pleased by that? Because the only concern of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas is the benefit of sentient beings and the reducing of the suffering of sentient beings. Therefore, if we take even one person who is experiencing problems, who is experiencing terrible suffering, and we offer them some kind of kindness, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas will be very pleased. So how much more with a wish like this?
저세 가르레스. 손지 선바 퇴년도야. 간도야. 배는 알아서 다 소소 보게 뻑은 나오지나. 다 되면 되면도 반다고 아마지요 봐이나. 다 뻑이 될 뭐ян다고 대서 좀 받지 봐이나 아마지 쉬치고 가기로 왔어.
So why? What is the reason that because of this the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas are pleased with us, draw closer to us? We can think about the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas as being like a parent, like a mother. If a mother has just one child, right, then it's like that child she loves so much that she can't picture herself living without it. If that child does something positive, brings some sort of benefit to others, then she is extremely pleased. So it's just like that.
다 대고 제와 야보도 해더니 이나 저 손지 선바서 senjel 제와티 다 야도 둔다리 다 추가지 해더니 니나잖아.
So that's a very kind of great form of compassion in a way. That is something that is very laudable. But the compassion and the caring possessed by the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas is greater even than that.
오다 던지지래 대이자 손지도 선바 senjel을 보겠다. 야보 제와 이나 고로서 드비체반도 그래 두년도 그래 세리아레스.
So that's why this offering of a practice is something that pleases the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, who are pleased by any efforts of any sentient beings who they hold as dear as their children to do something positive.
야, 되네 다 저체 대라 때문에 몸무게 던도질 내바시와 이나 가로서 자서 체가로 어다 내반도와 이나 강가트 뭐냐바지도 어다 던지지 우리가레스.
And similarly, we can understand the other side of that, right? That because they care about us, then the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, they're disturbed if we harm others, even small animals and so forth. If we harm them, this is something that will draw them further away from us. So that's something to be aware of as well. And so this verse actually is really the verse to receive the engaging bodhisattva vows. Verse 27, I shall cultivate pure conduct and abandon sin and craving. With joy for the vows of discipline, I shall train to emulate the Buddhas. Sorry, I skipped ahead. Sorry. Verse 27. From this moment until I achieve supreme enlightenment, I shall have no thoughts of harm, anger, avarice, or jealousy. My bad. Verse 27. He said, Geshe says, as soon as the warning about anger comes forth, Kedrup does something kind of annoying. Well, at least I can be relied upon for that. Okay. Thoughts of harm is how nusem. Thoughts of harm is how nusem is being translated here. So that's like really holding on to a wish to harm someone. This is said to be the main thing actually that degenerates bodhicitta. And then it's given as troesem, which is kind of like wrath, but really we can understand it as anger here. And so Geshe is saying that actually that wrath is kind of, he's saying that it's not anger exactly, but it's an emotion very similar to anger. So you might just want to note that in terms of how that's translated. So how it unfolds actually is that the feeling of kind of wrath arises first, then you have anger coming from that, and then as that anger solidifies, it's that wish to harm or that thoughts of harm. So that's how it kind of unfolds. So at the moment that wrath arises, there's a little bit of dislike for the person and so forth, but there's not kind of the intensity of the anger yet, which is what follows. Yeah, so if we have that kind of moment of wrath, it's like really choa, but it's all, I would almost describe it as an annoyance from what I'm hearing from how Geshe is describing it. So from that moment of annoyance, then if we do an analytical meditation on why we dislike the person or what they've done, then that will quickly go to anger from that first point. So last time he or she did this, and then the time before that they did this, and then probably they're going to be doing this later, right? And in this way that it solidifies into anger. So that's that kind of analytical meditation on the perceived negative qualities of the person, which helps that annoyance or that wrath kind of graduate to the level of anger. And so then when we start to plan revenge, or what we're going to do to get back at the person, it's at that point that we can really see this thought of harm manifesting. So this is also relates to some advice from Pabonka Dechin Ningpo, where he says that, like, you know, in the way that you sort of analyze the object of your aversion or attachment, you know, that arises anger and so forth, apply that same analytical meditation to love and compassion, and you'll be very successful. And so a lot of great practitioners actually advise that with love and compassion, it's really through analytical meditation that these can be brought forth strongly. So what we want to do is use the analytical meditation mostly, and then do a little bit of placement meditation. And this is the way to kind of really bring those forth. So this bears mentioning, because what can happen is we like to have experiences, right? And so we might have like an experience of love or compassion, and then think, oh, I'm just going to kind of just focus on that experience and just relax and do placement meditation on that. But we haven't actually done the analytical meditation that's really going to get us where we need to be. So in that way, you can't cultivate meditation maybe as powerfully as you'd like.
Yeah. Papa Lochimba is a no manner.
Yeah.
So on a time of Levicala, but I'm Malaysian, that's what you could reach out. Tako ha Levi Pacho. See Nichin Nato Maris.
Yeah.
See Tombodelan, Nibadi Janet, and Natombodelan.
So there's an episode related to this principle, which Geshe would like to share with you, and he thinks that it is related to the story of the Arahat Lamchungpa. And so please correct me if I'm wrong, folks, but I'm sure some people are familiar with this story. I believe Lamchungpa in Sanskrit is Chudapantaka. And so in a lot of people familiar with the Lamrim, you might see him as Chudapantaka. So Chudapantaka, he was a student of the Buddha, but he had very, very limited intelligence. So when he was like given a verse to memorize, by the time he had learned the first line, he'd forgotten the second line. And by the time he learned the second line, he forgot the first line. So he really struggled in his cultivation.
So this 걸 라마티가
So it's important in this context because when the Buddha was questioned about why Chuddapantaka struggled in this way, the Buddha explained that he was, in one of his previous lifetimes, a great meditator who possessed some concentration, but he was just kind of emptying his mind and concentrating on the bliss of the formless realm by not thinking about anything, by thinking about nothing. And the result, right, was that current lifetime.
그래서 어다시고 돈바서 제요라 마셔바지 고자는데 바이는 제요 무시케스긴 리뷰는 거
So the holy beings explain that if your approach to meditation is not thinking about anything, if that's the cause, then the result is lacking the capacity to think about things, right? So that's how that will unfold.
어다 데이터 제거 뭐 보여는 તને 주고라요 니파테는 તને 하네 비도 붙여요. 됐다.
So in this way, if we've done a lot of analytical meditation, if we've been really thorough in that approach, then our placement meditation is going to be really effective and it's going to unfold naturally.
딘디바지 다다 손지 탈게 바이자 다 니까지 콜로타는 되는 뭐 통치체 그걸로 좀 봐.
Yeah.
잡아서 아이나 잡아르지 콜로 통치체.
Yeah.
빈자도 세이나 그럼 다 강게 되죠.
So Chuddapantaka, he really struggled with this, and so as a layman, he was kind of looked down on by his relatives and so forth. And then after he became a monk, he was looked down upon by the rest of the Sangha.
아니 손지 탈게 바이자 가지가 말해서 다 저런 니까지 로유서 먹었어. 니까지 줄라 거르지서 너들이 저 돈이 다 좀와서 쉬었어.
And the Buddha actually instructed Chuddapantaka, he said, don't get discouraged, but rather than studying, rather than memorizing, focus on some other things now. And so he gave him the task of cleaning the temple.
다 건조질 체 도벌래 그들 디포 토마토 건조질 손지게 될라. 타마를 거 롬에 바파게 할래야 다내체 도벌 좋아서 왔어.
And then the Buddha said, as you're sweeping, as you're cleaning, recite this mantra, abandon dust, abandon stains, abandon dust, abandon stains. And actually from following these instructions, in that lifetime, Chuddapantaka was able to achieve realization. Dust is not something external, right? The dust of the afflictions is something internal. That was kind of a realization he was able to have by just following those instructions. So in that lifetime, Chuddapantaka was able to have a direct realization of emptiness and reach the state of a foe destroyer. So if somebody who is seemingly so limited was able to do that, then certainly ourselves, we don't have that level of limitation. We're definitely capable of this. And so definitely all of us possesses some wisdom, and so whether that wisdom becomes strengthened or becomes sharpened or not, right? This is something that depends upon our own efforts, our own endeavors. And so then as we move on, it's a talk about how to kind of abandon anger and then how to cultivate good conduct such as patience. Yeah. So actually from 27 it's talking about these things that need to be abandoned, but this is the beginning of the unfolding of a discussion of these 6 paramitas or perfections actually. Yeah. So the first line of verse 27, so actually it's it's actually the third line in the English, but we can understand that this is actually sort of in the background indicating the practice of the perfection of patience. And so avarice or so actually Dave corrected me on this word last time, so I can't remember what he told me, but I'm hoping that avarice is meaning miserliness. And so then, yes, thank you. And so then, I always appreciate, so then if Dave or anyone notices, oh, that word doesn't sound quite right, let me know. I'm very grateful, believe me. So avarice, abandoning that is actually the practice of generosity. So that's another of the 6 perfections. So actually, this avarice and this jealousy, right, these are kind of 2 of the minds that can really impede our development of the bodhisattva path. Verse 28 we come to. So we come to verse 28. I shall cultivate pure conduct and abandon sin and craving. With joy for the vows of discipline, I shall train to emulate the Buddhas. And so cultivating pure conduct, of course, this is talking about the practice of ethics. And so ethics or ethical discipline is, of course, another of the 6 perfections. As we come to verse 29, taking no joy in swiftly attaining enlightenment for myself, I will remain until the very end for the sake of even a single being. So what can we understand in the context of that? Willing to remain for even a single being? This is joyous effort. So another one of the 6 perfections. Joyous effort. So taking no joy in swiftly attaining enlightenment for oneself. One way of thinking about this is so don't be too self-interested in wishing to quickly attain enlightenment from the perspective of, oh, I'm experiencing this suffering or difficulty now. I don't want to feel that anymore. Therefore, I'm really going to get enlightened quickly, because that's actually not the kind of mindset that we want to cultivate. So that's important to cultivate, to understand here. So for a Vajrayana practitioner especially, for a tantric practitioner, right, we talk about that tantra allows one to swiftly achieve enlightenment. One doesn't think that I want to swiftly achieve enlightenment because I want to get there quicker, because I just don't want things to be complicated anymore. One has to think that, whether I have, that's not really that important. The point is that sentient beings, especially the ones connected to me, they're going to have to wait longer in samsara if I don't get enlightened soon. And that's the reason we want to achieve enlightenment quickly. This one, or sentient and so then this point about for the sake of even a single being, remaining in samsara for the sake of even not so easy. Just thinking I'm going to do whatever is necessary to help them, to be able to help them reach liberation. And so it's requesting the blessings of the holy beings to be able to remain in the hell without respite for interminable aeons, if it is even for the sake of benefiting one single sentient being. So that's the gist of that verse. If one has a strong feeling for that, and that strong, actually it's said that it's not going to cause you difficulties because of that determination. Without much difficulties because of that purpose. So we will end here on verse 29. We'll leave it here in the lamp of the path, and we'll continue next week from verse 29. And so then, sorry, we don't have a clock that's easy to see here, so I just need to go.
저왜 어야 잠깐만.
Path text, he finds it so beautiful, kind of so nicely laid out that he gets, yeah.
레오로 와서 가정가서 쉽게 지시에 자와래. 메세가 깔 손으로 도도 가르래. 유세가 깔이나 던지가 손지 공부를 비탄 가가는 라기 있을 길에 살아 왔어. 달라서 가를 라가서는 파시 주더래스.
So, especially here, it's really beautiful because we have the wishing or aspiring bodhicitta that we bring forth, and then we have that engaging bodhicitta, you know, and then having developed that engaging bodhicitta, we might think, well, what do I need to do? Train in the path of the bodhisattvas, and so in this way, the text very gently then goes to explain mitas or perfections, which are the practices of bodhisattvas.
야 로르 체주가와 이나요 다들 티니엠보 론지 멈바샤바 파시주 할래야 티니엠보 간디세스.
And so there's a really beautiful practice to ripen one's own continuum, the six perfections.
예지 멈바샤바 대인이 보시스.
The four ways to ripen the continuum of others, training in the four activities of disciples.
딘디바지 다 자주 통바티로와.
Yes. And so now we will come to the volume 2. And so, in terms of where we are, so for those of you who have this...
니빠 바다 개와 junge 대체바라 상주조 런저 럼바 만은 저다 녀선로 임베바 쳔비 티소시비 유저 소소를 예비 티지고라 셰티도 마티 녀티.
This middle is the explanation of the meaning of the text with respect to the practice and so forth of the stages of the path to enlightenment applied to the direct instructions. Of instructions contained within the individual lineages, I have put great effort into listening to and contemplating, such as explanatory instructions.
제데 가자기 타치 슈체 야바동 셰와 통체 라레데 시타르는 노이 흉스 녀와 디바 거드샤고.
So, explanatory instructions are a tradition of instruction. One primarily draws conclusions based on scripture and logic. The great Lord Lama Tsongkhapa authored his great treatise on the stages of the path, primarily instructions, in which there is a strong focus on refuting others' views and asserting one's own position. This is opposed to his middle-length treatise on the stages of the path, in which he emphasizes the sustaining of meditation, observations, and aspects, thus not presenting instructions in which conclusions are drawn. Shloka di drosoin. Sorry. Shepa tamshe lama songshwa.
된로서.
So, those who know how to bring all these explanations into their practice seem to hardly exist. Therefore, so explanatory instructions, what you'll notice here is that a lot of scriptural citations and a lot of valid reasonings are incorporated into this style of explanation. It explains kind of a difference in these two, right? It contrasts the great treatise of the stages of the path, which has those extensive quotations and reasoning, to the middle-length treatise, which just talks about the how to kind of meditate on the important aspects.
Lami nyonyo go tone ngoteji lomi teta goji chimi ramba bubayi den ti jonu ne zoyi.
Instructions are like the instructions of a doctor, wherein they cut open a corpse, laying bare the entrails such as the 5 vital organs and 6 hollow organs. Great detail. While practicing, and the way discursive thoughts appear to mind during meditation out by the guru according to their own experience. Furthermore, while the disciple meditates in this manner, the guru sequentially bestows focal objects of meditation. So meditation objects. So the focal object of authoritative texts through the experience of the guru, until the disciple has given rise to experience of focusing meditation, so that's what I would translate that as placement meditation. They are made to strive in sustaining certain observations and mental aspects. instructed on a new round of contemplation in accordance with the stages of excellently generating experience. Whether it takes, the instructions are given as the disciple meditates. Gonda again, disena konso nyamyong duja di ko nyamyong male bardu ko rimbanipa ragyo mare rwa dene nyamyong jela rwa dene nipa dene sumba.
야 시부 중 코로까리는 뭐냐서 가시요와 시분 지그 까리는 가시요와 빼나 렌데다고 짜자바이나 아니 단전에 간다고 짜자바이나 대치 볼 거자 못했지 고자는 초와 땜벌려서 어느 전에 많이 발만.
So I was asking Geshe, like, what's the kind of practical, because experiential, so what's the practical difference? Experiential instructions, the topics are given to the disciple kind of one at a time. The preciousness of a human life with the freedoms and richnesses, and once the student has developed an actual experience of that, then they might go on to explaining cause and effect, a bit like that.
어다 어디도 와서 어다 빼나 두만이라고 찾아봐이나
And so if one were teaching in this way about emptiness, so for example, one might not use a lot of scripture of negation. And then once the student in meditation has been able to identify and start to target the object of negation, only then would the Lama give them further instruction. Ale, loso.
Sushi, Moyona.
Ale, loso. Michik, dene konsu sungshu.
Sojaviares,
Durwachik, Gagja, Tongtubna.
It's Tashiaina.
Yeah.
Gajang in the Mashingela.
Yeah.
Gajatashus, the boy.
Ale,